Hey, what's up? I am David Long. Take 3. This is gonna be our third attempt to try and get Robert to be in the video. Hopefully he'll be showing up soon. Robert MacNaughton is currently the head of the Integral Center for Integral Life and Integral Institute, so I'm real excited about getting him to be on camera with me today. Says he's connecting. There he is. How you doing, bud?
Good, brother. Let me find a pair of headphones that'll work with my phone here.
Okay.
We're good to go.
Sounds good. I'm going to plug in my headphones too. Great to see your beautiful face today. It was able to get through.
Now that tech has allowed us to actually connect, this long road of Facebook comments and such forth can result in actual human interaction.
Look at that. How you been, man? How's your day?
My day is good. I led a weekend at the Integral Center this past weekend, and so I've been spent the day recovering yesterday, and now I've just been getting back to work, and starting to figure out what I'm going to be doing with my life now that the Integral Center is moving on to being put out to pasture.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the Integral Center in Boulder is going to be coming to an end here very soon. For all the people who are out there, like I actually just recently found out about this not that long ago, and I found it to be kind of heartbreaking. I'm sure it's bittersweet for you. I'm sure it's probably like heartbreaking and also sweet relief.
It's all of that and a whole lot more. And fortunately, I've been able to be kind of processing it, so to speak, for over a year now. I've known this was coming, and I've done all the, diligence as to seeing like, okay, what would it look like if it kept going on, versus just letting it go. And that's the latter is what I came to and really made the most sense out of everything, that trying to recreate this in a new space just didn't have enough of the kind of the same loosh that came together when we opened this up 7 years ago.
Do you think this will open up some kind of a hole that people will feel the need to want to fill, and maybe some other leaders will step up and do some other things to try to fill that void?
Yeah, that's my intention. Or at least I'm going along with that, being somewhat of an apologist with the whole process. But that's my desire, is that, the Integral Center has been such a beautiful resource for so many people, integralists and just folks in Boulder and things like that. And that by like letting the fields go fallow, as we've been saying around here, it allows maybe for some new springs to shoot up as the energy gets to kind of recycle in new ways. And then it doesn't have to be all on my shoulders and the other leaders around here, and folks can go through that same process that I went through, and so many of us have gone through, where there's like a void and there's like, oh, I want something in my community. I want something and I wish someone else would do it. Oh, wait a minute. The fact that I know what I want is maybe enough to get it started, and that agency, that autonomy can birth new leadership. So you don't get attached to the same old leadership.
I think that can be good. Even having a model that encourages leadership in everyone who's in the community from the beginning to take up some of these roles and host some stuff at their house. And, oh, you want that? We'll start an event about it then. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I unfortunately, I've only been able to come to the Integral Center once, so my perspective is not from necessarily getting to be an insider. I just kind of got a peripheral view of it a little bit. And,
sure. We didn't even get to say, hey, when you came through. I was bummed about that. But you came through for one of our parties and got to, do a performance and a presentation there. And unfortunately, we missed each other on that ride. But at least you got to see the place.
Yeah, it was really inspiring to me to see the place. I mean, as a person who, myself, I've started a few integral groups, and one in Vermont. I tried to start one here, and I was a little bit involved with one in Dallas. And here is Fayetteville, Arkansas, by the way, for those who don't know. And it's really difficult to put together and to hold together a community like this, especially for what you've been doing it for like 6 years. Is that right? something like that?
7 years, the Integral Center, and I've been working out of that building since 2004. And that's when the Integral Institute had offices there, and then it's taken on many different forms. And of course, the building has its own rich legacy just beyond the Integral community. But yeah, I started working for the Integral Institute back then, and then we spun off the media company Integral Life. Was around 2007 or eight, I believe,
Okay.
and then yeah, it was the end of 2011 that we took over management of the building here and the new company, the Integral Center.
Man, there's so much I am excited to try to talk to you about in whatever kind of a window we have here together.
Happy,
But
yeah, happy to.
I'd really like to know kind of how you got involved in all this in the first place.
Yeah, how far do we go back? I was born Atlanta, Georgia,
I
and
mean, like with Integral, like how
yeah,
did you
for
get
sure.
involved in that? And
In a certain sense, it does kind of go all the way back in that, like, I left the conservative meritocratic private school South and came out here to Boulder, kind of on the gold rush, as I like to say. It's like I knew something was out here. People were saying things, and hopefully it wasn't just the pot they were smoking. And there was like something like that I was looking for that I wasn't being, didn't have the opportunity to, wasn't being given to me in the culture that I was raised in. And so I was attracted out to Boulder and kissed a lot of frogs and found a lot of fool's gold, so to speak. And then, started to really tap some more like real stuff, the real good stuff. And that was around the time that I encountered Ken Wilber's work. And I like, after I left computer engineering school, like didn't see a light at the end of that tunnel. I went to the green pastures of Naropa University and got my degrees in music and yoga and such, and was exposed to Ken's work there. And I was like, who is this guy talking about consciousness using mathematical equations and things like that? And but really started being opened up to these meaning making maps that allowed more legitimacy of how I
yeah,
of my own identity, allowed that I could be more than what it seemed society needed me to be, if that makes any sense.
yeah, absolutely. And now, I'm a musician too, so I'm curious, what kind of
Nice.
music do you do?
Well, when I was at Naropa doing my undergraduate work, I was doing like computer music, like
Okay,
crazy avant-garde, digital signal processing live with dancers and video and all sorts of just kind of going crazy on stage in as many ways
okay,
as possible. Because I was an engineer, I was like, kind of a mathematician, but didn't want to do it for problem solving, wanted to do it for, artistry. And then,
right.
but it was also just kind of always like a campfire guitar guy. So, I was, me and my acoustic guitar, and then crazy computer stuff.
Nice. I can relate to that. I was very curious. Have you thought about like merging those things too, like having like a electronic acoustic kind of combination where you can
Well, it's
do a little
always
bit of
been
both?
Yeah, it's always been one of the things I wanted to get back to. It's like whenever I do those kinds of, visioning of, what do I want to do with my life? Like getting back to my music composition is the thing that's always on my list. Like as soon as time frees
Yeah.
up, as soon as I'm
Well,
able
maybe
to.
now that you got a little bit of time, we can expect maybe some kind of Robert MacNaughton album coming out, huh?
Yeah, now I have to get back to my homework, do the real work. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna keep an eye out for that. I hope that happens.
All right, good. Give me a kick in the pants about it.
Yeah, you can keep an eye out. I have an album coming out in, hopefully next month. So
Oh, good,
yeah, got a
good.
new one. Got to
Well,
make
it's
the
really
special music for the integralists, right?
Yeah, well, it's really nice to be face to face with you, David, because just tracking your work primarily just with what you post online. You've done a really good job, in my opinion, of producing these high quality videos that get to kind of take a deeper dive down some of these philosophic rabbit holes that we can come across with the deeper tenets of integral theory. And it's been useful for me, and I know it's been useful to a lot of other folks. And you also kind of play a bit of a coyote in the community. You kind of like, can keep us on our toes, pointing out some of the places you might disagree with Ken or the theory, and kind of, poke people to see how they respond. And I think that's always can be a useful force in the community, so that we're not all just kind of agreeing with everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to a lot of people in the community that seem to be in separate camps and won't talk to each other.
Yes.
Like, I not that long ago, I was both talking to Andrew Cohen and Frank Visser in like the same week, and they were both like, "I don't like that guy," and I'm like,
About
"Well,
Ken, talking about Ken.
no, talking about each other." You
Each
know
other,
what I mean?
yeah.
So I was like, I can understand why you might not like that guy, but he brings something valuable to the table, and I appreciate them. So I would hope that people don't just see me as like a negative shit starter or some kind of mean spirited person. I hope that people would realize that I really, really, really care about Integral and its
Hmm.
potential for the world. And so if I'm critical, it's because I want us to do better. I want us to be able to refine and grow together. And that's to some extent part of why we're probably having this conversation today, because I'm really interested in how we can have the most fruitful integral movement and an integral community. And
Hmm.
you have been, from what I can see, the Integral Center is probably the furthest that anybody has taken an integral gathering or an integral community as of yet. And so you're really out there on the cutting edge. It's one thing for me to be back here like theorizing about how we could maybe do it better, but you've seen what works on the ground. And I'm really interested to hear
Yeah.
more about that, some of the pros and the cons, and what
Yeah.
works and what doesn't, and how you think we could do it better. And we could talk about some ideas around that and stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great, David. And you know, first of all, just yeah, appreciate your good heart and good intentions around your service of the integral community. And I hope everybody gets that
Likewise,
as they get
brother,
to
I
know you
really
better.
appreciate the work that you've done over the years, investing in this thing. It's
Yeah,
big props to you, man.
thanks. And as far as our impact in the world, we've kept metrics on some things, but it's we can't say we're more or less anything else. There's been a lot of amazing projects and people within the formal integral camp of like bringing things to the world, like JFK University, and of course like Integral Institute, and then all the diaspora, all of the great organizations that have come out since then, and all of the work that's outside of the formal integral with a capital I community. There's lots of great work out there, but I would say that like I we've had a strong experience of seeing what happens when you try to put this stuff into work, into real life, and particularly running a business, trying to just have the bottom line going without having any benefactors, and bootstrapping this from day one. And in a lot of ways, this is kind of the impetus of this call. Is you made a post which is kind of like, how integral is the integral community? And it's a great question. It's one that I have a lot, but it's a great opportunity to be able to speak this to you and anyone else who's going to watch this video as to my opinion about it. Because on one hand, like guys like you and I and others might be inherently interested in philosophy and we're drawn to Ken's work based on our comfort zones in that realm. And but a lot of people aren't. And when we would lead with integral theory and integral philosophy at the center, it attracts some people, but a lot of people were like, hey, not interested in the heady stuff. Let's get back to the juicy stuff. And therefore, that's what the relating work ended up being our, killer app in a rose-colored sense, but really just what met the market and
Yeah.
allowed people to give us enough money to stay alive over these years.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening earlier. I was going back and trying to do a little bit of my Rob MacNaughton homework and check
Oh,
out
good.
some of your videos and stuff. And there was one about like stages of leadership. Do you remember that one that's posted on the YouTube page of?
God, that one's a while back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
old, but like a couple of your older videos kind of give me a hint as to the like original intentions and ideas behind where you guys were going with the community center.
Yeah.
And even from what you're telling me now, it feels to me like I feel like the beginning of first stage, like early integral, being that it's still very agentic, it's almost like integralists are undercover in the world. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I feel like y'all are kind of doing that, some of the translation undercover type stuff, right?
Hmm.
In a green culture, like let's get into these, let's touch in with the green values, and let's resonate with some of these people and see if we can't give them some upgrades in an undercover kind of style.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of it all depends on what's our intention, big picture. It's like, do we say, okay, the world needs to be at the integral stage of consciousness? And really, that was kind of the closest thing we had to a mission statement at
Yeah,
the beginning of things, was to help the humanity get to the tipping point of integral consciousness.
yeah,
And not really sure how to measure that. There's a lot of ways to do that. And so, as my friend and teacher Jeff Salzman, who's also the guy who owns the building, he said many times, it's like, if you're actually practicing integral and living in an integral community, or practicing that way, you're at least up to your neck in green,
yep,
because that's theoretically that's the stage that integral consciousness is birthed out of. And
yeah,
for those of us who don't know what we're talking about, green being the stages of psychological development, but postmodern green being the level of consciousness where we're done with meritocracy and hierarchies, and we want more egalitarian, inclusive sentiments. And it's a lot about intersubjectivity and shared reality, and like what we construct with our shared meaning of things. And all of a sudden it shows that, oh my God, we live in this world of nested contexts. And that everything that we do has an incentive tied to a context. And so all of a sudden we start to want to deconstruct everything, and that can go off in its own positive and negative directions. And the negative directions lead towards the birth of that leap into second tier integral consciousness. That was
yeah.
way too fast, and I'm probably lost most people, but
You know
just wanted to
what?
give a little bit of context.
I have some intro material too. I can link in the
Great.
description. And if you're at all confused about this stuff, I'm always working on trying to make more intro material and
Good.
make some of that stuff. Especially like me and my friend Alyosha, we're doing the integral review. So in each one, kind of like a daily evolver type thing, except for we're doing more
Great.
like review type stuff. But we always include links to intro material. So I've been trying to put together a, a page to put that stuff to, so we don't have to spend too much time.
Yeah. And y'all make comments on this video if you're watching live or
Yeah,
after it's posted. Make comments, and always happy to deep dive on any of these
feel
topics.
free to ask questions. We'll get in there and we'll parse this stuff apart. For me, when I was first starting some groups and stuff like that, one of the things that I was noticing is that it was real hard to please everybody. Like some people would come and they would really want that we space kind of connection, right? And then there
Yep.
was other people of us who were more like leaders, and we almost had to we wanted to have a leadership group and figure out what we're going to do in the world and how we're going to bring together the community and all this stuff, right?
Right.
And then there were certain people who wanted to just share and give talks about the stuff that they're working on and that they're interested in, their own unique integral expressions and stuff like that. And what I kind of came to the conclusion of is that we needed to have multiple different types of spaces for all of these things to happen, and that they almost needed to have their own containers, so that way they don't step on each other in some kind of
Man.
way, where we can have our we space, and we can have a potluck, and we can just chill as integralists and have tribe time.
Yeah.
And
I think, the ability to categorize things in an appropriate way and set context appropriately is what leads towards, good traction with these things.
yeah,
And, trying to be an integral center for everyone is a now, granted, I have a lot better strategies of how to do that now. So if anyone out there is wanting to create an integral community, I am for hire. I think it's a worthy investment. But it's very difficult, and not everybody's into the same thing. And in a lot of ways, I was trying to follow what Ken laid out in integral spirituality, the conveyor belt. The idea, if we're going to have a community center, church function going forward, then that needs to serve people where they're at and whatever level of development where they're at, because we all go through those stages. And
Yeah.
so in a certain sense, I found the authentic relating work was really appropriate for anyone, that everybody wants more, or wants connection in their lives, and there's not a lot of great access to it these days unless you already have a fair amount of social intelligence that way. And so anyone at any stage of development or worldview or political affiliation could come into a context of where we're just trying to understand each other better and develop communication skills in the right way, and get a lot of benefit out of that, and also have the the benefits of healthy development go along there too. But I definitely found that not teaching, integral theory and having that cognitive development go alongside paid a big price, because postmodern green sentiments definitely took over, and there was a lot of times where people would look at me and be like, "Hey, who put you in charge here?" And come on, community, we're going to put this to a vote, when there's people that have like been in town for a week, and they're thinking they get to say what happens and things like that. And so I threw my hands up in the air. I was just like, whatever, I'm just going to like run this business. But then actually just in this past year or so, I started just another integral class, and saw that I had enough authority in the community by this point that people who weren't normally interested in integral theory would still just come to hear what I said. And I was able to kind of start weaving these things together of, why it's important to develop integral cognition, so that the green doesn't just win the space when it comes up.
I know you guys had a pretty big community, and I definitely did feel a strong green vibe while I was there. Did you ever have people who were integrally informed who would come and they would expect it to be like a more explicitly integral community, and they were slightly disappointed by that?
Both, like some, people coming from an integral orientation being like, I'm coming here because it's the integral center.
Right.
And some people being just like, oh, cool, this is what we're doing. Great. Let's do that. Let's practice, and let's be around people. And they weren't so concerned with it. And a lot of other people, maybe not completely disappointed, but a little bit like, you call this integral? Like, really? And granted, parts of me, were consistently embarrassed over the years, not so much about, the practices being done, but really just kind of the state of the building, the state of the offerings. It's like, a couple $1 million in investment really could have helped us have a better sheen so that we could, just have some, more aesthetic development. Because,
I
it's a bit of a frat house.
I appreciate your honesty around that, I could imagine that for some people there would be some sensitivity, or it would be hard to admit something like that. But I respect the fact that you're like, it's well,
the horse has left the barn,
Do you think see, because when I think about how to solve that problem, I would still want to have the open events. But like, when I think about what you were talking about in your video about the different stages, I almost think about, like, you were talking about the distinction between like stage 4 and stage 5 or whatever, where like stage 5, that your center is viewed from the perspective of being like a larger movement, and you're maybe just like one expression of that movement that's tied into a bigger thing that's happening globally, and you're collaborating with other movements who might be like-minded. I almost think about it from that kind of a perspective, where it's like,
for sure,
I think that there needs to be kind of an inside-outside distinction, where it's like, you integrate people into the inside. You have open events, but there's a distinction between the converted and the people we're still preaching to,
and we actually started with a version of that. So when we first opened, we formed a faculty circle of kind of people in town who already had authority with what they were working with and could fill a room, to curate, to see the programming. And then we also formed a community council, a invite-only group of people who, got to have additional benefits with membership, and had a every other week, it was just community council got to show up. And it really was the beginning of the membership of the community that started out there. Problem was, we probably invited a few too many people. I think there were 65 people in the original community council, which was great, but it was a little more inclusive than we needed to be. And it was very green, in that a lot of folks didn't care about integral theory and were more just kind of coming from there's just too much to integrate when you get that many people in the room, and you can't please everybody. And I don't think my leadership was as developed as it could have been back then. I didn't really know how to just say sorry, that you don't feel that way, but we're going to do it this way in a clean way, and not kind of having my own,
right.
Stick up my butt about it. And so it was hard. It was a beautiful thing for a number of years, but we finally put a bullet in its head after, 3 or 4 years. And, but that was the way, to do it. And I would say that again, and more to your point, having a integral education that's formalized, that's going through that. Because when you start something new, there's a special critical moment that you can set a set of requirements that you can't ever do again.
Right.
And so, if I was advising someone on starting, or if I was starting a new community, it's just get really clear on how you want that community to be.
Yeah.
And it's just okay, we're gonna study integral, so we all know what that means.
Because you only get one start, you only get one chance to start, right? And then you have to fix stuff on the back end. And I imagine it sounds like when you guys started, it was already a big group. It was already when I was really lucky with the one I started in Vermont. There was only a handful of us, and two of the people who I started it with were developing integral leadership programs. It's called Collab. So it's kind of a hybridized version of a holacracy, and we processed tensions, and we had really skillful governance, rooted at the core. And I learned a lot from them about leadership and governance, and I've been thinking about scalability and how to make an actual integral movement. Because that's when I think about the potential and the power of integral theory to change the world. There's a new integral age coming, and it's up to people like you and me who care about this stuff to bring it online, and that means we need to codify this stuff. I would really like to even work with you more to flesh out some of these. Maybe we could make some more videos or something, and and have conversations about I would love to hear more about your ideas about structure, how to organize these groups. And I would also really be interested to hear more about the history of Integral in terms of its projects and things like that. It sounds like you were in there on the ground floor of a lot of that, and I'd be really interested in your perspective. I think what Ken was talking about back in the day about we're not in the transformation business and a focus on translation. I think that was good for the time, but now that Integral has so many business, so many practitioners, so many people know about it. We're a worldwide international phenomenon, and I really think that it's time. The world is dying for integral leadership and integral governance. It's for us to be able to get past this might makes right, top-down legislation of taste or bottom-up mob rule. We have the systems and the structures to be able to start something better, and I just think that we need to make it an actual option for people to be able to choose, and it could really be a powerful, world-changing movement.
I think it's I think that's pretty clear to those of us that have seen that and been watching it over time, that the reductionistic thinking of either or, it's either my culture or my belief system or my political ideology, and every conversation is about, let me tell you how mine's right and yours wrong, that kind of traditional conversational rhetoric, that we know that there's another option, that there's a holistic way to view things, that it's not either or, it's both and it's not about which perspective is right, it's about what value does each perspective have and what partiality can it let go of, and that we can frame conversations, we can frame projects and organization around that.
Yeah.
But the challenge, as you said, it's where the rubber hits the road. It's for any of us to, when we start a project like this and then seeing what actually happens, because the mystery is far beyond what any of us can wrangle in.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's all about our own self-development, because we can come in as prepared as possible and then, just be prepared to have our asses handed to us.
Yeah.
And that's really what we have to do, is keep kind of showing up to the rodeo that way. Because,
Hmm.
it's like, as much as I thought I was prepared, the stuff that comes up to your door, and when I'm having to like throw homeless people out into the snow at night because, we got a giant heated building, and like, yet I still have to hold my boundaries because, the tragedy of the commons is a real thing.
Yeah.
And, and like just seeing how over and over there's so much in each of ourselves as individuals and as a culture. There's a lot of growth to do,
Yeah.
but I'm not hopeless. I do think it's possible. I'm not totally sure if like your local brick and mortar integral center on every corner is still the way to go. That was certainly my
Right.
strategy at the time. I was like, hey, if churches were able to do it, come on, let's get a new upgraded version. Uh, but at this point, I'm much more kind of broadening my horizons around it.
Yeah. I'm working on this book right now called The Long View, which is kind of a clever way to get my name in the conversation and
Of
to
course.
also talk about this idea of, all we're ever really doing is pushing the ball down the field. If we
Yeah.
could spend the rest of our lives working on trying to um, create this integral movement to create like an integral global structure or something like that, who knows what kinds of new problems are going to be coming online, even if we accomplish everything that we want. You know what I mean? Like the world will transform and there will be a whole new set of unforeseen problems that will be on future generations to deal with.
That's a really good perspective. It's kind of like if we're taking that long view, if we're thinking not only just my generation, but 7 generations out, or even 1,000 generations out, what actions do we actually need to be or want to be successful with here that makes their lives that much more good, true, and
Yeah.
beautiful?
And right now, a lot of what the conversation is around, like a lot of this revolutionary system deconstruction kind of stuff going on, like with the Zeitgeist movement and like
Sure.
the Venus Project and all this. There's lots of it, really, really exciting stuff coming online, but it's a lot like the South Park underwear gnomes, where it's like step one, collect underwear, step three, profit. It's like there's no
Totally.
plan, you know what I mean, to move us from the world that we know has problems to this kind of resource-based economy or whatever it is. So my book is about trying to come with a plan, talk about the stages of an unfolding revolutionary movement. And I do think that a community center type of thing can be a stage of the unfolding. I think
Sure.
also a commune could be a stage of the unfolding. But all these things are like I would say, just a stage.
Yeah.
Um, and I also, going back to what you were saying before, I think a lot of it could start out as a trickle, but at a certain point, you got to be ready for the flood, and that means having your stuff really, really together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to be like, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna get this movement going, and then what do you do when you have tons and tons of people who are like, yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? That's like, you really have to be prepared for this kind of stuff, and you really have to spend a lot of time planning and testing, and also not getting too ahead of yourself too. Like
Yeah. And then
there.
a 1,000-year flood comes out and like, just destroys 7,000 square feet of your building and knocks your business plan back a year. There's things that come from all different directions that will test your constitution.
Yeah, that's the literal kind of flood, huh?
Yeah, so
Y'all
that
had to
was
deal with that, right?
2013 for us, when, one morning there's a foot and a half of sewage. The water didn't come from the outside, it came from the inside. It came up through
Oh,
the
nice.
toilets. And so a foot and a half of sewage, in our entire lower level of the integral center. And,
That word
you know,
flood was a little bit traumatic for you, huh? It brought up some past trauma.
yeah, that was a truly educational experience. But but it turned out to be a really beautiful thing. I think, phoenixes rise from the ashes. We never found the kind of corresponding metaphor for what comes out of water, but the community came together. We did a big fundraiser, raised enough money to rebuild everything and stayed alive. And I think the community really, the greater Boulder community, were like, oh, wow, they're still alive. They're still
Right.
here. And, gave us some extra credibility after that time.
Like out of swamps blossom lotuses, or out of
There you go.
sewage there's some diamond in that dunghill or something.
It's one of those.
Something like that. So what would you say are some of the major lessons that you've learned in terms of pros and cons over the years in holding this space?
Yeah, I should probably keep capturing a list like that of top 5 major takeaways, and or just keep recording videos like this, or write my own book, or something like that. But so much of it, like on the pro side, is just do it. Just like if you've got the opportunity in front of you and you have the raw materials to start, just do it and show up and see what happens. In the same way, like going home to the holidays to be with your family, just do it because the opportunity's there. Not because you're going to win and finally show them that you have a validity to exist, but because you'll get your ass handed to you, because you'll get to learn from the experience. And so just allowing a project to start, I think, is one of the main things that I got out of this. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that the opportunity was there.
Well, thanks for being bold and stepping into it, man. I really appreciate that. There really are not enough of us who are willing to be leaders and demonstrate the way. I really like that, and translation or transformation, we need both, and anybody who's out there doing good work and pushing the vision further and helping giving people upgrades deserves the utmost respect.
Well, yeah, I agree. I agree with those sentiments. And really, I think, second thing I can share is I see this over and over. Because one of the things, we having this giant space is we're more of like a property management company, unfortunately, than a program curation, company, which I wish we had been more of. So as always, we were more in reaction than we were, actually producing on the front end. But so many conversations, people in the community being like, hey, it's my time. I'm ready to share my teachings with the world, and I want you to give me a room so I can share this with your community. So many times people will be like, I think your community is the right audience to hear what I have to say. It's like, okay, let's go for it. As if there's like some community waiting just to show up for everything that happens at the Integral Center. It's like, it's hard to get anyone to show up there, depending, because there's so much stuff happening, and people go to what they trust,
Right.
And people value their time. And so my coaching to folks has always been, it's like, don't try to figure out what is going to be valuable for people. Do something that you wish was happening. Bring value that you wish someone was bringing to you. Like if you're wanting to learn something, as you learn that, you're becoming an expert on it. Or more particularly, if there's some kind of event, it's like, hey, I wish there was partner dancing happening in my community. Well, you now know something that wants to happen, and you can put that together just because you have those details in your mind about it, and just, ask the right people. And invariably, every time I've done that, every time I've had the idea, it's like, oh, I wish something was happening, and I go and do that, other people tag along. Other people want to show up. There's just, inspiration that comes from that, as opposed to what I've tried to kind of like scratch, our noodle about what should we create here that would bring more people around. That was usually fairly flaccid, of just trying to kind of like conjure things up out of thin air. And so that's one thing. And then also on enrollment, on like getting people to show up for your things. It's funny because I always use myself as a litmus test. It's just kind of like, am I being sold on what I'm writing right now? Or if I'm coaching someone with their marketing, it's like, is it selling me yet, whether I'm the target market or not? And, so when people would say, it's like, okay, I've got this event going on, and can you email out all of your list, to let them know? It's like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. But here, here's what you should do. If you don't already have a brand, if you don't already have an audience of people that trust what you say, or people that are willing to come up for your kind of event anyway. It's sometimes called the karaoke rule. Like if you're gonna do karaoke, like sing a song that everybody knows. That's way you can screw it up. Doesn't matter. Everybody's gonna sing along. If you're gonna make up a new song, you better be able to crush it. And but if you're bringing some new content, this is the time to reach out to your network, and don't say, here's why you should show up to my thing. Here's why it's so great. Say, I want you to come to my event because I value your feedback and I want to hear what you think. Do the vulnerable
Engagement.
thing.
Yeah.
Do the thing that's like a vulnerable request that's like calling in credit. And it's hard to say no to that. If someone says, Robert, I really want to get your feedback on this. Your opinion matters. Can you show up to this thing? It's much harder for me to say no because they're calling on my desire to give and be available. But if they're saying like, oh, Robert, here's the value you're going to get out of my thing, I'm going to stay home and watch Netflix because your ability to produce something that's of higher quality than Netflix is probably pretty small. So, that's another tip.
And you did marketing for Integral Life, is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the Integral
I hear the
Institute,
marketing coming through is what I'm saying.
well, for sure. I mean, that's kind of been more of my career than anything else is how do you market to an audience that's diversified through the levels of developments. How do you do conscious marketing, authentic marketing, like all that. I've been through that merry-go-round many different times, and it's different because it's like if you're marketing to an orange, to a modern audience, you can say things like you're going to make a lot of money off of this, or there's a time limit to get on. People aren't going to hate you for it, because that's how the rest of the sales world works. Versus if you're marketing to a green audience, you have to use some different language or some different techniques to get through those filters if you're really wanting to target it deeply. And so there has to be a lot of artistry around that.
Yeah.
But
a lot of Integral is marketing, right? Because we're basically like, I have upgrades. How can I get them to you? Right? How can I?
Right. And then like, do you want to look like me? Is a lot of what people are saying. It's like you're pitching updates to me. Are you like, do I really want to be like this person? So
right.
A lot of it is role modeling.
Yeah, that's why I try to not seem too overly intellectual. I try to make it seem fun and cool and colorful and fun and young. Because I think it should be fun. I think it should be cool.
And it can be.
And it can be.
Yeah, and making fun of ourselves was much easier to do as opposed to trying to look good on camera, is like just kind of having some levity about ourselves and just being real about the thing. Fortunately, it works unless you're trying to hit more of a professional market where someone has to get their CEO to sign off on the budget approval for your course, and then all of a sudden you got to wear a collared shirt a little more often.
As a person who's an editor who edits a lot of people's speech, you're really well spoken, man. You do a very good job of not stuttering and and I know those kind of things because like I edit a lot of people talking, including myself, and
well, that's good to hear.
You do a good job, man.
A lot, so maybe it's just a lot of time sitting in front of rooms over the years, and that's another tip. All of these things work out through practice. What's the only way to get to Carnegie Hall? Call Uber. There it is. There's my I actually just saw an article in, I think it was Harvard Business Review did a research about those. I forget the word they called them. There's something for when you go or something like that.
I call them moments of uncertainty, but I don't know if that's what other people call them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that compliment. I really appreciate that. And just like coming back around, it's, get on camera as much as you can for those that are wanting to be on camera, and it tends to work out over time. Maybe.
I really like your message of just jump in and do it and see what happens, see what you learn from it, do it again, hold the space, see what happens, and it'll teach you. Mm-hmm. That's I really like that invitation to be bold and to to follow your bliss, and if you find something that you really want to be happening, to do it. Like I that's kind of what I try to do as well, is not to just be upset that, you know, other people maybe got it wrong or I don't agree, but I want to think about how we can do it right, how we can do it better, um, and move the thing forward, step out
Yeah.
there and not just be critical, but also put some ideas on the table.
Yeah.
That's also why I like Frank Visser, is because this is a dude who's been committed to trying to engage with and, you know, refine the theory for a lot of years. I honestly wish more people would get engaged with that conversation and take the criticisms more seriously. I mean, it's going to be good for everybody
Yeah.
to be able to learn. There's a bunch of integral shadow happening on Integral World, and it's not really being integrated, in my opinion.
Well, you know, I've gone down that rabbit hole myself, and having read a lot of Frank's stuff, and you know, seeing him at conferences and things, and um, I know there's like, I agree with you. I wish I and other folks could dive in there more, but I think I would also say there's some diplomatic ways that we could make that easier, and
Yeah.
and it's kind of like what we train with here at the Integral Center. It's like, stop just doing straw man attacks, or you know, committing logical fallacies, because it doesn't have people want to stay in the conversation, as opposed to being curious and asking questions, and like letting the updates happen through like more of a Socratic method that way, as
Yeah.
opposed to doing like an either or on it. Like
Yeah.
I've found when I'm working with people that I disagree with, I have to start with putting my disagreement aside and getting curious about what I still don't understand about where they're coming from. And that but that takes a lot more energy and kind of
Yeah.
investment. And so it's, I mean, sorry, like it just, you know, the
No, you're
last
right.
time I dove down this rabbit hole was I was leading a book group on the Religion of Tomorrow, Ken's, you know, latest kind of big deep dive. And,
Yep.
and Frank did a really strong criticism of this, you know, philosophical underpinning element of integral theory that I think is incredibly important, that there be a dialectic, that there be some kind of a conversation around.
Yeah.
But it was very difficult to figure out how to do that, because
Yeah.
the ideologies, as usual, are so at odds.
I would definitely like to see more debate in our community. Like,
Agreed.
what I see, you know, is you have that one little section where there's tons of criticism and no engagement with it, really.
Yeah.
And Integral Life, where they have a bunch of people on and we talk about how much we agree and how integral we are.
Yeah,
And there's
totally.
not really a lot of real critical engagement. Like, one of the things that I think would be really exciting, not just as the integral movement, but I mean, part of what I think, if we can apply some of these integral governance structures to the ideas, like I think we could really bring the human conversation online like never before, and actually start to engage and like map out, you know, our conversations and come to real conclusions about a lot of these kinds of things,
Yeah.
where we can
Yeah.
say, okay, this point has been, you know, taken down, that will not stand, this one won't stand either, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
here's the argument, here's how it's undone.
I
You
agree
know.
with you. I think you know, because we're a Integral Center is a holacracy, you know, holocratically practicing organization, and we baked it in at the operating agreements level, just like Holacracy 1, you know, so that like even at the board level, you know, we have to practice that way. And one of the things I learned from that practice, amidst a lot of other things, is that integrating tensions is possible, but it takes a lot of work. Like, you really have to care to integrate attention in the same way, like, you know, you're saying here, you know, unfortunately, a lot of these debates happen in like dang Facebook comment threads, which is the worst place on earth to have a reasonable conversation. You know, the context isn't clear. People are just procrastinating from work anyway, so you're getting the worst versions of themselves, you know, versus like, in some ways there needs to be like bounties set up or something, like, you know, or organizations or, you know, businesses or products that are specifically oriented around this.
Yeah.
But you can do it. I mean, we hosted, like, after Trump got elected, we hosted a panel at the Integral Center of Trump supporters.
I heard about this.
And we got, an incredibly diverse group of 5 or 6 panelists. It wasn't hard to tap our network and find people that were willing to do this. The hardest work was setting up the right container. I had to take people's phones or, make sure their phones were turned off so there was no recording. Had to tell the reporters that they couldn't record. There was a reporter in the audience who took notes and published it the next day. That was okay, but I had to protect the identities of my panelists. But beyond that, it was a really civil conversation, but it wasn't a debate. I said very clearly up front to the audience, I was like, this isn't about you. This is about understanding them and them having a chance to express themselves here. And we can ask questions and we're going to do active listening, but we're not going to. And basically I said, like, if you're too hot, like if you can't, hold your seat around this, it's okay to leave. And, we won't judge that as you as a less person. We'll actually judge that as you as a responsible person. If you can't stay in the conversation, take yourself out of it. That's fine. That's humans. Humans are fallible that way.
Yeah, that sounds like you had a deep practice of really trying to listen to them and to understand where they're coming from and see what their concerns are. Was there some kind of critical engagement on the back end, or was it the whole point of the event to generate understanding and sympathy kind of a thing?
Yeah, it was about understanding. It was about kind of like, all right, at least in our neck of the woods, we've heard how upset we are about this eventuality, and that's what everybody wants to talk about. Well, right. The folks that may have a different opinion probably aren't able to talk, because if you say one word, you're going to get thrashed,
shut down, and all that
are so high. And so that's what we teach. That is the business that most people are interested in, because it's so rare these days, is how can you do enough personal development, like enough self-development such that you can hold your seat even when the judgments are so loud and your desire to existentially protect yourself is so loud that you can't. How can you still provide enough of context that you can listen and then maybe hear something that you haven't heard before? And of course, recognize that they're just human beings. And so when we had these panelists get to say just where they're coming from without having to defend themselves, just like with enough space that they could actually express themselves, we had a lot of people in the audience say like, wow, I've learned a lot of new things. And in some cases, you've done more research than I did, in preparing for these elections. And so, I think there's an opportunity for lots of more forums that way. And for so many, I think the really charged debates, the classical, like really charged topics, we could create more venue that it's educational. It's about learning the arguments. Once again, it's not about who's right or who's wrong. That's a path that leads nowhere good. It's about getting acquainted with the arguments, because this is what happens in ourselves. This is what happens with our family. This is what happens with politics in the world, as people go down the same trodden paths. And if we can get to know those paths really well, then we can be of more use when we have to go down them ourselves.
Right. So you're not saying that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong, but you're saying that if we want to be able to really be able to be effective in talking to people and to get over our shadow and to really see the person who we're talking to and not be straw manning them, that we need to take the time and listen, and we need to not just have these immediate kind of reactions that come up to where we already know, oh, we're going to kill this guy. He just said the word Trump.
That's right. Yeah, that's a very good point, right? We're not talking about letting go of discernment. We're not talking about like not making decisions. Like we all have to make a decision, at the end of the day, of one way or another. But having the humility to really be in a place to get educated allows our discernment. But you're pointing to a good thing there, and that does come from more of a of a postmodern inclusive place of like, so many people would come to the Integral Center, and it's just like people that are like homeless, and the community is wanting to understand them more and take care of them. And like, you got to be careful. Like, you can still love people and have boundaries. You can still kick someone out of your event for the sake of protecting your event while like maintaining their dignity. And that only comes through maturity and experience, and in my experience.
Yeah. Tough love is really hard too. Like, and you really love someone and you really care about them, and you see them making a foolish decision or doing something that you worry about them, in terms of it being harmful or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to say something, but doing it skillfully and figuring out what the best way to go about that, where they can hear you and you can let them know that you've heard them. It's a practice. I really I encourage a lot of my friends and fans to practice philosophy as almost like a spiritual practice, to get good at practicing listening to other people and knowing what their arguments are, and to practice some Socratic questioning maybe before you jump into assuming.
Yeah.
Quoting other people and stuff like that, not putting words in their mouth. And you can sometimes just phrasing things in the form of a question as opposed to saying you said this or something like that can be huge. Just knowing how to frame these things in a way that aren't immediately abrasive and attacking.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to our own development, and so having a rigorous practice, whether it's like sitting on a meditation cushion, or anywhere where you can have a system or a teacher or something that holds you to a higher standard so that you can grow more, then you'll have that ability to know how to slow down and recognize the canaries in the coal mine in your own system. Because I've had plenty of times, we all do, where it's like I get an email or someone posts something and I'm losing my shit, and if I just respond right there, it's not going to help anyone. It's just going to make me feel something in the moment, like I have to defend myself, as opposed to the usual thing. It's just I'm just going to wait till tomorrow before I respond to this. And then doing that in the moment, kind of one-on-one. It's on our better days, the ability to be like, whew, God, I really hate this person. I really want to say something defending myself right now, but instead I'm going to listen instead and say, tell me more, or I didn't know that, and
figuring out that philosophical process of maintaining your integrity and not stooping to personal insults, and staying on point, and even dealing with people who are, not living up to your standards of integrity. It's part of my daily spiritual practice is doing philosophy, and a lot of it has really helped me to deal with my shadow and calm down and be more skillful talking to people.
And one thing I often say, it's extremely patronizing, but imagine that you're talking to a 5-year-old, and not that the sense that you're so much more wise and mature than they are, but if you're talking to a 5-year-old, trying to tell them how they're wrong and how you're right is going to get you nowhere, and especially if it's your own child and you actually you need to get the kid to eat or to go to bed. How do you meet the person where they're at?
People are really sensitive. If they don't feel like you respect them, you're not going to get anywhere with them. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Just saying you're wrong is,
that horizontal development, and integral at its most simple, is like having horizontal realities reconciled with vertical realities, and this is what we're talking about: having rapport, having humility, of realizing that a 5-year-old might actually be more awake and enlightened in many ways than you are, and you do have something to learn from them. That's like an essential aspect of reality. And then the vertical dimensions of reality, that hierarchies do exist. And not just dominator hierarchies, but actualization hierarchies, that value and meaning are important constituents of this existence, that if we try to act like they're not here or that they're bad, we're setting ourselves up for a lot of additional suffering that isn't necessary. And integral is just the best maps that we've come across for making sense of all of that.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. So in terms of going back to Integral Center, I know you guys do the circling practice. Is that one of your main things?
I would say that is the thing that we energized the most and paid our bills the most, was holding programming for people to experience circling, having practice, 3-4 times a week here at the center. We have circling labs, and then our circling facilitator trainings were the real way to do a deep dive with the community.
Okay. I want to hear more about that too, but I also know that you guys, I've heard about T3 training or something. That's where you teach people integral theory and some of these leadership skills and stuff. Is that right?
Well, as far as integral theory, that's a bit of a longer story. We tried to teach more integral theory and ILP and such at the beginning, but a lot of folks and some of even our fellow course leaders were like, get that heady stuff out of here. That's not what they're here for. People were, uncomfortable about it, and we weren't as strong enough, like I was saying before, at the time to say, it's like, no, this is part of it, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So anyway, we kind of let that go by the wayside, and it's not as an essential part as much as the essence of circling is integral, is about fostering humility, but also integrity and dignity in these ways, and learning how to facilitate, like cultivating openness, like how to be a facilitator for that, which does require all of these components. But it's a very visceral, like, okay, what happens when you try to lead, when you try to facilitate, a mediation or something like that? What parts of you are getting in the way, or where you're losing enrollment with folks? So yeah, the T3 training is a brilliant way for people to do a deep dive in community with each other, and it's always been a winner for folks that have gone through it. And so yeah, it's good.
So I'd like to hear you explain to me about circling, but I also want to remember to ask you if you have any like regrets or things that you wish that you would have done differently, or things that you would have changed, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, those are two big rabbit holes. But just I'll answering on the regret side.
Okay.
Deeply. Like not a day goes by that I don't get hit with many of them, and that's been probably the most difficult part of this process for me. Is just going near the Integral Center, I'm just filled with all the ways it could have been better, and I could have worked harder, and we could have made more money, or all of those things. And of course there's plenty of things to pat ourselves on the back about, and the company was in a better financial position than ever this past year. We're not closing out of any failure whatsoever, but more of an appropriate moment to step away and close a business, complete a project with dignity. But the regrets are from everything from like, man, I really should have just done my integral monk thing, where just like the people that showed up at our door that just wanted to live this and didn't have a job and were ready, like give them a bunk bed in the basement, but like have them sign a contract around like, okay, you're doing morning meditation every day, you're showing up for the circles, then you're doing chores, and then you've got your group, your accountability group, and like we could have really kicked ass with having some people that were just in it to contribute and grow themselves.
See, this is where like an integral commune, I think, would be like the next coolest thing, where we like step out of the community at large and we build our own new way of living together. To me, like when I fantasize about the integral movement, that's probably the part of it that like feels the most exciting to me, like living with a bunch of other integralists and figuring out how to create a world and reality together in that space, in that integral we space. That to me is like super exciting.
That's good, and I think a lot of people would agree with you. I think that's not as exciting to me these days as it was,
I bet it's not.
Several years ago back, I'm looking for the white picket fence more.
But maybe
days,
it would be more exciting to you if you didn't have to think of yourself as the leader of that thing.
For sure. if I was capable of that. But that it also brings me to, it's like there's a lot of that happening, and whether it's integral or not, there's plenty of people who call themselves integral that you don't know how many people I've met. They're like, oh, I've been doing integral for a long time, I haven't read any Ken Wilber stuff. Oh, but we're integral. And yeah, I've had the same response. But if you're one of those people, do yourself a favor and study integral theory.
Do some studying. That'd be pretty great.
But it does, to give credit, like I think there are plenty of commune co-op-like communities throughout history that have done a better job than most integralists at living this stuff, simply because you're you're doing it. You're
Yeah.
doing that
They're
deep
in it.
dive in and just
Yeah.
seeing what works, because the bills have to be paid, food has to be grown, the bathrooms have to be cleaned, and maybe integral consciousness helps those things in some way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, just people working together is what it's all about. So I agree, and I think some integral forms of that are emerging more and more, and there's some great opportunities for those that are looking to get their butts handed to them that way.
I want to go back to the circling, but I also want to answer Julian's question here. There wasn't any kind of catastrophe or scandal or anything. It's just that the lease is coming to the end on the building. Is that right? Something like that. And there's a lot of just like things coming to a close, and it seems like a good time to kind of step away and let it do its thing. And I'm really interested in the possibility of like what kind of a structure or advice you would give on a 2.0 if you got to start over. You know what I mean? Like how like it's gonna close down. It's gonna be done, and then who knows? Maybe like a year from now or something like that, after you've written your book and we've talked and had some videos or whatever. And then you have some other people who are supportive, and you have like a good idea about structure, and you're ready to like kick it off. Maybe we could get it going, and it won't just be Integral Center Boulder. It'll be like the Integral movement, and here's the handbook. You start yours where you're at, and we'll meet online, and we'll share resources. And from someone like me, like an integral artist, like I would love for there to be a network of integral systems to be able to go around all over on tour and play shows in all these places and have like, talking tours and stuff like that. Like we need to bring these things together.
Who's ready to build this in whatever town they are can just download the kind of best practices manual and have a place that they can get questions, and also have programming that they can just instantly install, in your community. It's like, hey, this attracts people. This is how to do it right. Here's the copy on what to post on Facebook. So I have slides.
So we're on the same page on that.
Full of business plans on how to do this. And I spent the last 7 years, but the better part of the last year, drafting together business plans. I mean, we were putting like letters of intent and new spaces to buy here in Boulder and various things like that. And unfortunately, it was a little bit, like I said at the beginning, it was just kind of pushing uphill and didn't feel right. And so I thought that it's like, let's let it go. Let's let these energies kind of die first, and then we can start talking about it. But I am confident that it's doable. Like I know the business models of how I would do it, to create a license-like model where you can plug into a network like this and have your hand held, in an effective way. And so,
well, if you want a team member or a peer to run stuff by or something like that, I would love to be on board with this project. I'm deeply invested in this project. I'm going that way anyways. We may as well team up and go together,
Yeah, and there's probably plenty more folks like us that have the same energy and just need to be kind of organized in the right way.
I think it's like I'm saying, I think it might start off as a trickle, but it's going to be a flood. There's a huge demand for this kind of stuff. At a certain point, it'll be like, more than we would even be capable of dealing with.
Yeah. Something like Terry Patton and I have like talked about before is kind of like, we just hope that it happens, maybe we'll be included, maybe we won't. And that's the real humbling part. It's like,
that's too why
is anybody going to care?
That's too why I want to write this long view. For so long, I was kind of like keeping my cards close to the chest, being like, okay, I'm going to be the one who's going to play these cards when the time is right. But now, more and more, I'm just like, I'm going to put these ideas out there. If there's another person who runs with them, I'm just glad to be in the conversation. And if I could help, it's not about any one of us. It's about what we're trying to do. So, if we can be contributors to the conversation and like help make the thing happen, that's great.
Yeah, it's a very humbling time for me right now in that regard, because we just had a weekend a training this weekend, a gathering, circling gathering, and the last hour of the event was all these people speaking to how this community has helped them, and a lot of tears and a lot of like beautiful acknowledgement for what a community like this can do.
Yeah.
Integral theory or not, and it was awesome to receive that and to get acknowledgement like that. And there's a part of me that's like, wow, shouldn't I be leveraging all of the kind of momentum that we have in a various way to like have it rocket ship from here? And after the analysis, it's kind of like actually there's probably a lot more energy that's possible if we wait a little bit and wait for the timing to be right. Because when Decker and I launched the Integral Center, we weren't out there like, oh, let's create an integral community business.
Right.
Jeff's building went up for sale, and we got on the phone and we're like, let's do this. We had been wanting to work with each other anyway, and it just like all the kind of blessings that came into alignment around the time we started this. You can't force that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, you've been doing this leadership role and been holding this space for so long. I think, this gives a chance for other people to feel that urgency in themselves for it to not be so available. And it gives the chance for other leaders with the passion to potentially step up and learn some of the lessons that you've been learning and hold some of this space, and it's going to grow them. And, this also gives you a time to step back and reflect. Like, that's I think right. all these things can be good. It's like, it doesn't have to be, just because it's over doesn't mean that it's all over. Right. It is sad for me to think of like, the only integral center on the planet closing down. It's heavy. You know what I mean? As an integralist, to be like, you mean there's no more Boulder Integral Center? Like, does that mean that there's only these few little salons around? And hopefully that lights a fire under some of us to really take an assessment and be like, are we doing this integral movement stuff or what? Are we? That's
the point, man. That's the point. And like, the way I'm holding it is like the Integral Center has offered a lot of important lessons over the years for those that were close to it, and like everything from the one taste fiasco in the beginning that had us branded as kind of like this polyamorous community, and that reputation never wore off. And then there was the flood, and then
I didn't know about that first thing.
Oh man, we could go down that rabbit hole, but tell you what, it's exhausting. And like many really powerful things for those that were close to the community, it's like you can't learn that any other way except by viscerally being in it. And I think this closing is the last great lesson of the Integral Center. The fact that you're experiencing that shockwave, that realization of like so many people that have hardly ever been to the Integral Center at all, but just knowing that it existed and now contemplating its non-existence is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And because it shows us how much we value it.
I think also, pretty soon it's gonna be 100% in our hands too. You know what I mean? Like, Ken's not gonna live forever. Like, I say that with a heavy heart. You know what I mean? Like, sure. Pretty soon it's gonna be up to us. It's the only leaders are going to be the leaders who step up and take it and run with it. So,
well, it has been for some time now.
Yeah,
I don't like that everybody drags Ken onto these webinars and things when I don't think that's what he's wanting to do much of these days.
Yeah, and before, I remember back in the day when we were doing the Occupy calls and stuff. Do you remember any of that? Were you involved with any of those?
I wasn't as involved, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, we were having some Occupy integral stuff around the Occupy times, and right. Ken Wilber got on there, and he was like, "Yes, you're integral. Take it, run with it, do it."
Yes.
So we've had his blessing for a long time.
Totally.
We really need to stop.
Waiting for someone else to do it.
Waiting for someone else. There's no integral Jesus. It's up to us. It really is 100% up to us. We are the leaders. We need to step up and do it. And I really feel like it's, you know, it's going to be our generation that decides the fate of the human race. Like it's really, we're living in a crazy time in history where if we don't figure this shit out soon, like with the next wave of new technology that's going to be coming out, like we can't have this old decision-making process anymore. We can't solve these problems of global warming with our current systems. We really need to step it up and bring these things to the table to save not the planet, but to save humans. We need integral leadership, and it's a serious time to be alive, and it's not just about having these intellectual masturbatory conversations. It's about, you know, bringing these ideas and to the world and letting the rubber meet the road.
Yeah,
I know you resonate with this stuff, because even when I'm watching, you know, your intro video when you were first talking about the Integral Center, you're like, you know, I'm tired of just being in rooms talking about these things. I really want to live them and live them together in a community of other people who are like-minded, and we're doing it. So I felt a lot of resonance with your early coming up with it and building it videos, and being excited about the energy of bringing this thing online early on. And even though it's closing now, I definitely don't feel like it's the end. I feel like it's a great chance for the beginning of something new, and I'm really excited to see, you know, what comes out of what you've learned so far and what the 2.0 is going to look like. So it's exciting stuff.
Well, thanks, David, and that's inspiring. And I am on the same page in my own ways. I also take the flip side of, like, we can't get too anxious. You know, I've been really enjoying like Steven Pinker's work and things like that. It's just like, actually, we're doing a good job. We still have to keep working, you know, but don't flip your crap too much on it.
Yeah.
But you know, that's right. Like, this is the time for inspired action, and that's even if there wasn't a tragedy happening out there, this is the existential inspiration and motivation that has kept us going as a species for all these millennia. You know, that it's this inspiration that we get to ride, that gets to take us through and give us all the beautiful things that life has to offer. And you know, that to me, it's like I'm wearing my dandelion shirt right now, you know, because it's like you know, this is an opportunity. The Integral Center has blossomed, and now it's time to kind of, you know, get those seeds out there so that they can germinate in the right places. And you know,
that's a beautiful metaphor.
Feel free to hire me to help you do it, because my bills are starting to stack up now that I can't pay myself anymore, and I haven't fallen in love with any new projects yet. So anyone that wants some support with these things, I'm available for the time being.
Yeah, and if you're gonna hire him, hire me too. I could use.
That's
money.
Right. The David and Robert, we are Integral Consultants team is ready for hire.
There you go. I'll be making up those business cards soon enough. Yeah, and you know, when I talk about how the world needs integral, for those who don't know, I'm not saying that I think everybody needs to have an integral worldview. What I mean by that is we need some kind of integral governance, some kind of integral structures to help bring people up through the stages of development more skillfully, and better integral decision-making processes. And you know, also the good thing about these kinds of integral governance structures is that it can really integrate in good ideas from anywhere. You know, anyone can have a great idea. So even though we're doing meritocracy and natural growth hierarchy and stuff, it doesn't mean that we can't still have a really healthy, if not the most healthy democracy ever, you know?
Totally.
So
I'm on the same page with you there, brother.
to be clear about that, I'm sure you knew that, but for other people who think that, you know, we're just trying to like push the ultimate ideology or something, that's not what we're talking about.
No, it's always like, you know, you don't have to be interested in this stuff, you know, or not, but if you do want like some great support, it's there. I mean, guys like Ken and philosophers that have been been tracking these things have just done a lot of the homework so that we don't have to. And in a lot of ways, they've just bulldozed out the space. And living, it's a whole other thing. We get to do that. But as far as some amazing trailblazers, that resource is there for us.
So can you tell me about circling a little bit? I've never done that.
Yeah. So
I hear it's good though.
Yeah. So as you say that, like tell me more about. I'm imagining you're intrigued about the practice, have heard a lot about it, maybe have some of kind of on the shelf criticisms or presuppositions, but are actually interested in seeing what's below the shelf on this one. Am I getting you right?
I honestly don't know that much about it. I've heard good things about it. Basically, my understanding of it. I mean, I've heard the dude on who talks a lot on your guys' Integral Center page be critical of it, but
that's great. We got a lot.
But
of
I've listened to him talk a bit, and like read some of the criticisms about that. I'm not coming at it from his perspective. I'm genuinely curious to learn more about it. From what I understand, basically, it's something like a bunch of people circle you, and then they give you feedback or something like that, and then you process that feedback or something.
Yeah. Well, and so, just kind of starting this conversation by kind of like asking you a follow-up question about where you were coming from was my kind of caricatured attempt at demonstrating what circling is. So I appreciate you kind of going along for the ride on that. And I got a lot of good information as well, as opposed to just, telling you more about what I think. But yeah, the simplest thing, there's lots of different kinds of circles, but the one that's probably most known is what we call a birthday circle, where one person is the center of attention and it's kind of the object of meditation, and the context is we're all going to put our attention on this person and have a conversation about what comes up in the present moment, having our attention on them. And so and it's not like we're dissecting a frog. It's we call it a birthday circle because it's like it's your birthday. We're all here to for you, to give you loving attention and to imagine what it's like being you, and to you get to be the tour guide of what it's of Davidness, of what is the world like being a David. We're all gonna have a conversation about that with you, and then we get to share what's it like being with a David, and get curious about. It's okay, that expression that you just made and the fact that you just lit up around that, what happened right there? And it's a beautiful.
I was thinking of how lonely and boring it is to be a David, and how busy I am. But I do get to have great conversations like this with someone like you, so there are some pros.
So that's beautiful, and we could start circling you right away, right there, but it brings up a lot of challenges for people, because a lot of the time we want to fix each other, and you'll say, it's usually boring to be David, and so I might try to jump into a place well, how can I stop you from being bored, as opposed to just noticing what comes up for me when I hear that and sharing that. And so it really is like a meditation practice of noticing and labeling. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes for effective circling. And then to facilitate a circle is even more difficult, because you got to think it's I better facilitate this circle correctly. And if the person doesn't have a good, reaction to it, then I'm not doing a good job. And so all of our crap about bringing value into a situation comes to the surface. And so it's a really beautiful development practice for facilitators as well. So that's kind of just skimming the surface.
Okay. And so then do you take turns with it then, and then kind of go around, and what would be the normal thing that a person who had a really good experience would say that they got out of it?
I think most commonly there's the simple experience of having a bunch of people having their attention on you, looking at you, but without a need for you to do anything about it or be any particular way, and that there being a tremendous amount of relief. that it's okay just to be who I am. And I don't have to figure out what you guys need me to be. I don't have to kind of be any other way. And just kind of the basic anxiety of being a social human being gets to take a rest and kind of get reprogrammed of like, oh, I can actually be around people without needing to prove that I exist in some way, shape, or form. And so that's a broad generalization, but that's kind of like, I think essentially and subjectively what happens, but also like on the objective side, there's like these little relational blind spots around, getting the reflection. It's like, oh, I'm saying, a lot, or a lot, or I apologize every time I say this, or I raise my right eyebrow when I'm trying to be clever, like little, just that it's like a fire hose of mirroring from a number of different people. And the amount of data that you get from that just like naturally leads towards relational upgrades of like my model of myself and my model of others just gets to be upgraded just through the experiment of exposing ourselves in a skillful way to each other without trying to fix each other all the time.
And this is good for not only the individual to feel better about themselves and to feel seen, but it also is good to be held, and it builds community by letting these people really see each other and be seen by each other. Yeah.
Totally, man. Totally. And like our weekends that we do, they start off, it's a room full of strangers, and it's like, what the hell did I get myself into, and who's that guy, and why do they always have to be speaking up and saying stuff? But invariably by the end of the weekend, there's like more openness and relaxation to be with each other. And like, we just did a circling weekend this past weekend, and it was just beautiful how by the end of the weekend, it's just, there's so much closeness and connection with people that in many cases we have just met, just by creating that space to do the natural human thing of basic connection. And so there's circling, and so you were saying like, kind of, is it the kind of thing where everybody gets a turn? Well, kind of. I mean, if I wanted you to have a proper experience of circling, I'd want you to get like a 45 or an hour long circle where it's just you getting attention from the group
for that long. Wow.
Totally. Yeah, that's a workout for your nervous system. Yeah, it's intimidating.
Yeah.
But invariably, beautiful. And they can get crunchy too. Sometimes it's like that differentiating feedback wants to come in, where it's just like, this is all great and all, but I just got to say, I can't stop judging you when you say things like this. And
so do I talk too then in the circling?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a lot of kind of like, hey, what's going on for you right now? What's it like having this attention on you? How is that for you when she just said that she's like hating you constantly every time you say this, and like slowing things down to a moment by moment experience, so that we can actually like for me, being circled for the first time was like all my fears of high school, like all happening like right at the same time. And yet I actually got to stay with the process, and we're not just, actual high school students where we're going to run away from each other and then stab each other in the back for the rest of the day. And so, but it's also, it's very simple, and with a skillful facilitator and with people that have some development that are able to welcome those experiences in themselves and communicate them in a way that's holding some equanimity, but still being authentic to the feelings that are arising, that just isn't happening in many places in the world. And where, we have the benefit of getting to work with that.
Yeah, that sounds like a great tool, not only for people to be able to maybe heal some of their own insecurities and issues, but also to bind the group together and to really help them feel like they love each other and care about each other. I could see that as being pretty powerful.
It is.
I don't go to these kinds of groups, so most of my integral experience has been mostly like one-on-one kinds of things with other integralists. A lot of times, like I teach a lot of people integral. I also have taught a lot of people integral one-on-one. And like when you find somebody who's like really ready for it, and like it's like clicking in their brain, like it's like bringing all of these things together. It can be like fireworks, like multiple braingasms, and like there's this amazing kind of light in the room around
Yeah,
doing
man.
philosophy, and like excitement, and like this kind of oh my God, like you just totally like, change the way that I think about everything. I'm a new person after I leave this place. I wonder, is there anything that's like philosophically equivalent? Because I feel like what you're talking about is really good on like the emotional and interpersonal kinds of stuff. But what about like the super excitement around philosophy and worldview kind of stuff? Do you guys have things for that?
Well, I mean, in some ways, the whole experiment was meant to be that, and in many cases, yes. And so, like when I lead my like integral salon, at the center, I'm bringing in topics like this, but a lot of it we're benefiting from the rapport that we already have from people know me from leading the circling workshops or various things, or people know each other, and there's enough comfort that we can go into more of a topical philosophical domain. But oftentimes it's more difficult because it's easier for me to relate to you if the content
Right.
is what's happening here and now, because that's right here and now.
Right.
Going into story, and especially going into abstractions, is a very difficult place to track people. Now, one-on-one,
Yeah.
that's easier to do, but in a group that becomes like, it can be done, it can be facilitated, but it takes significantly more resource.
It's a lot more difficult. Yeah, definitely when I really feel like it's happening like that with another person, a lot of it is like me relating to them in some kind of way. Me, like you're saying,
Totally.
like it's tracking with them. It's like,
Yeah.
it's philosophical and abstract, but somehow it's also personal and relevant. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about how some of that kind of stuff would be possible on a larger scale. I could definitely see how it'd be difficult.
And it's like, I mean, I'm also not that enchanted by it anymore. Like it's an incredible thing, and it's done amazing things for my lives, and it's done amazing things for a lot of people. And I'm on the flip side now where it's like, yeah, it's all well and good that I can fall in love with a group of strangers over the course of a weekend and also feel my humanity come online. That's a miracle. And if it doesn't lead me to be better able to like take care of my children and like pay my bills and actually show up for each other when we're down, then it's not there yet. And I think it does help those things. I think in a lot of ways it helps.
I could see how it would.
Feeling the need to go out and buy a lot of shit or feed their addictions and things like that. It can really tap into that. And we still need to go the next step, that like these interpersonal practices and just being able to like mediate conflict and things like that are really good. But like getting back to work and like helping for the survival of humanity, of like doing the hard work, showing up for our family, showing up for work, like integrating tensions. That's the hard work, and that's the hokey pokey. Like that's what it's all about. These things are more like good audit systems to help us kind of like get back on track, but they're not the core thing that we should be doing all the time, because that's just hedonism. We need to actually know what our North Star is. And that's the difference between, having like autonomous level of self-development, which I think circling is actually really good at taking people from a socialized self into a, autonomized self, where people can actually speak to their desires, knowing what they want, not just looking outside of them for the norms, but for actually being able to take action and have agency. Brilliant at that. But there's a trap at that autonomized self level. Like once I know how to just do whatever I want, I can be the cool, aloof guy that is too cool for school, that doesn't have to subscribe to social convention and all of that. But it's hedonism at the end of the day. If it's just what I want to do in the moment, that's where that transpersonal self comes online. That finding that thing that's bigger than me.
Right, the higher purpose and how you fit into the big plan of it all.
Identifying with greater fields, and maybe that's a community, and maybe that's a movement, and maybe that's it doesn't really matter, as long as like if you're identifying with a resource that's greater than just yourself, your ego, then there's a satisfaction that's greater than yourself could ever give you.
That's right.
And that's transpersonal development. That is what's possible if we keep engaging these ways.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I want people to have access to that more, for
Oh,
sure.
for real. I like how you say it's the North Star of where we're trying, or like it's the hokey pokey. That was funny too. Um,
Nice.
well, this is good stuff, man. I'm super excited to. Are you going to work on some kind of an artifact about trying to harness a lot of these kinds of lessons and maybe figure out what a better way of potentially organizing it in the future now that you have hindsight? Is that going to be like
Well,
another project coming up for you?
I mean, this is one version of that. You
Okay.
know, like you wanting to do this recording with me, and I want to, do more of these things like this. Like, I would love to sit down and write the book on it, and maybe I'll do that. But knowing myself, that's also like a tall order.
Yeah.
If someone gives me, 6 months worth of expenses, I might have a better shot at doing that. But for the time being,
Are you
I think
thinking
it's going to
someone on
be.
this call is going to give you money? Hey,
You never know, David. You
if
never
there's
know.
somebody on this call who's going to give him
David gets a
money,
referral fee. He gets the
at
kickback.
least support me on Patreon or something. I could really use the money. I'm having a hard time paying my bills too.
We're
It's
all in the
hard.
same
It's
boat.
hard to be an integral leader, isn't it? It's not the easiest thing to find a job doing this stuff, is it?
Good point. Good point. But yeah, no, I hope so, and we'll see. I'm opening myself as wide as possible to see where my energy is going to take me, and it's a very vulnerable, humbling time right now to be letting all this stuff go and not really sure where the rent's going to come from next month and all of that. So let's stay in touch, and we'll fight through these trenches together.
Well, as I get a little bit more done with my book, I'll definitely send you a copy, and maybe we can
That'd be
peer
great.
review or team up on it or something. Ultimately, that's kind of one of the projects I see coming up. Besides, like getting a website where we could start to bring all these kinds of things online, like I'm saying, being able to hook up the different places and stuff. But we're writing this handbook, and not just having the long view, but also these kinds of different practices that could potentially be done, and ways of organizing and different things like that.
Yep.
Especially someone like you who has really practiced a lot of these things. That you have super valuable information in your head that needs to come out in some kind of artifact that we can all take value from. So
I appreciate that, David. Well, this has been a really great opportunity to rap with you, and I look
likewise.
forward to more, and would love to keep on geeking out about this stuff for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, maybe next time we could talk more about the history of Integral and some of the drama around the stuff in the community and stuff like that. I'd love to hear what
Lots
you
of
think
good
about
stories
some of
to
that.
tell.
Yeah.
Maybe enough water has passed on the bridge. We can. We'll try. We'll keep the names anonymized or something like that.
Something like
there's good
that.
lessons there as well.
I thank you so much for your time today, Rob. It's been such a great time talking to you. Can you
Yeah,
tell
brother.
people how they might be able to get a hold of you, or what's next for you or something?
Sure. So my Facebook page here, the Integral Center, that I'll keep posting my own things there. It might have a different name after the center itself goes away. Like Integral Decentral is what it's probably going to be. And
Cool.
so that's probably the easiest way to find me. And if I'm doing something out there, I'll make sure it's up there.
Word. Well, thanks so much for taking time today. Thanks to everybody who's watching. Peace.
Rock and roll. Glad the tech worked out.
Me too, man. Have a great day.
You too.